Okay, we're back again in Berlin, and I'm just going to give you a little bit more background before we start talking about the Berlin Wall. Of course, was a big deal back then. Uh, the city of Berlin itself was entirely sealed off from the rest of the Germany. The way geographically, Berlin was actually located in East Germany. So through treaties and everything else, the city of Berlin was divided into East Berlin and West Berlin, and the West Berlin was controlled by the Allies, um, which I mentioned before: the U.S., Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. So that was it. The wall really did. It was a very imposing wall, and it surrounded the entire city. So there was no getting in and out of Berlin, West Berlin, without getting through some sort of checkpoint of some sort. And of course, the checkpoint became most famous was Checkpoint Charlie, and that's the one that you would go through to get to East Berlin. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about that in a minute, because I had some very exciting times, and I'm just going to give you a little background about that. First of all, I just want to talk about, of course, being in the Army, the pay wasn't all that wonderful, nothing to scream about. So we had, enough to live comfortably, but nothing, certainly nothing extravagant, let's put it that way. So going over, like, trying to buy things in West Germany was not really much of an option, as far as, like getting nice things. Like, if there was always a desire to get photographic equipment and things while you were in Germany, because Germany is noted for its, or at least at that time was, for its fine cameras and instruments and things like that were really wonderful, and you were hoping that you could purchase these things. But to buy them in West Berlin was not really viable. So there was an exchange currency kind of thing that we could. That after being there for several months, I noticed that I would see 3 or 4 guys on occasion take a day off, and they would be gone for the day, and they would come home with all this stuff, really wonderful things, like beautiful camera outfits, and so finally I don't remember exactly who clued me in on this, but here's the deal was, if you took your American dollars and you went to a West German bank and you exchanged it for West marks, the West German currency, you would gain a little bit of buying power there. It was not insignificant, but it wasn't huge. But then, if you went to that bank and you exchanged the West mark for East marks in a bank, they would give you, it was about 10-to-1 ratio. So it ended up to be, if you had $1 of American dollars, you would end up with about $100 worth of purchasing power in East Berlin. But here's the rub. It was illegal to bring East marks into East Berlin. The catch was, though, that would be a big benefit to us, not legal, but it was a benefit, was that if you were in uniform, if you were in a military uniform, an American or Britain or any of those other, I think it was for all of them, but at least I should only speak for the Americans. If you were in American uniform, you were not allowed to be searched by the Russians or the East Germans or anybody over there, a policeman or anything. So that gave us the opportunity to illegally make this exchange rate and go over there with, let's just say, if I saved up $100, I would have the purchasing power of $1,000 in East Marks in my pocket. And that's what we would go across, and we would cross Checkpoint Charlie. And I should be showing some pictures of that. It's very intimidating because there was a soldier every more than double. Every person had at least one soldier of some sort, either soldier or policeman. It was incredible. You just couldn't get away from them. And they were heavily armed, and they did not look friendly. Let's put it that way. So it was quite an imposing thing to go across, especially when you knew you were doing something illegal. And and on top of that, I'm sure I'm not the only one that had this feeling, but I just felt I was acting as the capitalist pig. Not a good feeling, but my desire to have this wonderful camera outfit or whatever I was going after would outweigh that most of the time. So we did this. We would plan these trips, weeks in ahead of time. First of all, we'd save enough money to do this to make it worthwhile. And we would, there may be 3 or 4 of us would get together and decide, okay, we're going next Saturday, and we're going to go and we're going to buy camera outfits. We would pick one camera shop that was known to the people to go to, and literally go into the store, and we would pretty much buy the store out. It was an amazing thing, and the shop owners loved us because they knew it was illegal, but they were selling their stuff, so they didn't care, and they were happy to see us most of the time. So we did that. We would go, like one time we would plan, and we would get everything all set up, and we'd go across. And just going through was just terrifying because, they would be looking in your car, and, they knew that they couldn't stop us. They weren't supposed to stop us. And, you always had this worry. They always warned us, if something happens, if the car breaks down, or if something happens that out of the ordinary, you're stuck back, behind enemy lines, essentially. And you're kind of on your own. We don't know what's going to happen, and I don't know. It was a dangerous situation. So it really was nerve-wracking in many ways. And just being there, it was an amazing thing. The minute you would get across and you go from West Berlin, which was, I'm talking about now, we're talking about 1970, 1971, that time frame. It was a very modern, for that period, city. Pretty cool. And you would go across, and the minute you would enter across that wall, it was like going into a time capsule, and it was like going back to the late 40s or early 50s is what it looked like, what it felt like, in terms of the way everything, the way the buildings looked, the way the cars were, what few cars there were, and just everything was like really old looking and very behind the times, I guess we'll say it that way. So it was a really fascinating thing. So we would make our way. We had it all mapped out, and fortunately the people that had gone before us knew where these shops were, and they gave us very specific directions, and that was terrifying. We were not knowing where we were, and we wanted to make sure we got to the place and get our things and get out of there and get back across. So we would leave, and we would go to the shop, and the shop owners kind of knew the drill. They'd see us in uniform, and they knew what was coming. And we would literally, like when I bought my camera outfit, I bought every lens they had that would fit my camera, everything, a whole big camera outfit. And everybody, all the other 3 guys did the same thing. So we'd walk out of there with, just a car full. We would fill the car up and sort of hide it the best we could, and then we'd hightail it back through Checkpoint Charlie again. And fortunately, we always made it back, thank goodness. But it was always just terrifying. And then I remember driving, and you'd be checking around, looking behind you, make sure no one was following you, and you always felt like somebody was following you, and they probably were. there was so many police and so many military men. It was just an incredible thing. So we did that for the camera equipment. That's how I ended up getting I had a beautiful Exacta camera outfit that was just top of the line that I used for years. And then also another trip we made to go to a music store where they sold, it was kind of like, well, we don't even have them anymore these days, I don't think, where you go to buy sheet music and things like that, or method books and things like that. And I literally went there and I asked them to see their bass literature, the string bass literature, and they had a ton of stuff. And I bought the whole store. I bought their entire library of bass literature, which I still have sitting in a drawer, and I sadly say I never look at, which is a shame. So I have a library of string bass. I don't even know what's there, to tell you the truth, which is shameful. But hopefully someday I can pass it on to somebody that'll do something good with it. So so I got that at that one store, and then another time we made a trip, and we I don't think it was the same music store. I think it was another one that actually had instruments, and I ended up buying a rotary valve flugelhorn, which is something I always I saw it and I just had to have it. And I remember, I think I ended up paying something like $10 for it. Once again, that's like $1,000, but it only cost me $10. This beautiful flugelhorn with rotary valves, kind of like a French horn type valves. So that was incredible, and that's going to lead me later to another story involving my old friend Chris Dedrick, which I will tell you about probably in the closing section of the Army story. It's really after the Army, but it relates to it in regards to this flugelhorn. We also went another trip to I think it was a string shop kind of place that, and I was looking for, as you remember, the professor wanted me to switch to playing his style of German bow. And I originally was going to try to buy one at our string shop in West Berlin, but they were so expensive. Bows are not cheap, especially good ones. But I thought maybe, I asked them, they said, oh yeah, we think you could get something like this over in East Berlin. If you, then they told me what shop to go to, and we made a plan, and I went there, and lo and behold, I found a matching, two different makers, but they were almost the same size and weight. So I bought both bows, which to this day is just still astounding to me. I can't remember how much I paid for them, but it was dirt cheap. But they're worth a fortune. They really are worth a lot of money. So I still have those two bows. Those are the two I use. A Dowling, I remember what it's called, and one of his main. And these were signed bows. These are not production bows. These are handmade. And the other one was a Moyer, I think. So I have two wonderful international bows, along with my old. I still have my old H.R. Frechner bow, which I never use, but I do use it sometimes for. I tried to play my Fictor with it once, my Fictor bass with it a couple times. So yeah, that was the, and I'm hopefully showing you some pictures of Checkpoint Charlie and the Berlin Wall, and it was just a fascinating thing to see. And I just received communication recently from Doug Allwater, my last roommate, and he told me, he mentioned in his email that he had gone back to East Berlin, and he said it was wonderful now and all modernized and really nice to see. It was a very interesting, we used to hear stories about how families literally overnight were separated and never got to see each other again. They, when that wall was constructed, if you can imagine your sister or your brother lived across town, and suddenly now you never can see them again. it's just, you know, you think about these things, and it's just unbelievable that what people do to each other. So that was the end of the. I guess I don't know what else to tell you about that, except I'll never kind of forget that. That was etched to my mind. The going back in time feeling, just and the amount of military people that were there, and gosh. One other little story I just thought I might add in here at this point. I was thinking about it last night. This was really funny. My grandfather, Dr. Fideli, who I was named after, John D. Fideli, was probably at the time when I was over in Berlin, he must have been in his mid-80s, I think. Oh no, back then, he was a little younger maybe back then. Yeah, I think early 80s or mid 80s. He sent me a letter, I think, if I remember correctly, or he may have called me. I'm not sure. I think calling was not so easy back then. He must have sent me a letter or something, and said he was going to be on. He took a cruise, a European cruise, and lo and behold, he actually, left the cruise. I guess he had some kind of arrangement where he could leave them and then come back and hook up with the next group or something like that. He ended up coming to Berlin, and so I had to hang out for a day or two. It must have been only a day. I don't remember him. So we got to hang out anyway for a day, and I guess the biggest, the most outstanding thing, along with it was wonderful to see him, obviously. Just to visit, to have someone come from home come and be with them for the day. But the most memorable thing in my mind was we ended up going to lunch. I took him to this place. It was kind of a famous place that the soldiers would go to all the time, the military people in Berlin. It was called Frank's Pig Pen. And I actually found a photograph of the menu from Frank's Pig Pen back then, which I'll hopefully be displaying as you're listening to this. So we took him to Frank's Pig Pen, and we had, they had sort of Americanized German food there and stuff, and it was really, the food was pretty, as I recall, it was pretty good. Kind of a very relaxed place. I think they had, if I remember correctly, they had like the floors where it had peanuts or something on it. It was not a high-end restaurant, that's for sure. But it was nice, and I guess the most outstanding feature of it was they had topless waitresses, which was common in Berlin. Nothing ignored, but I just thought Gramps would get a kick out of that. So, and he did. We had a good laugh over that. We had fun, and of course he was a doctor, so it didn't mean anything to him. But in terms of that, but it was just funny. So that's just a little side story I thought of, and I wanted to throw it in because it was around this same time period. Okay, well, I think next thing we're going to do is we're going to go on and start wrapping the tail end of the Army story up, the Army itself, getting out of the Army. There was a point, I'll tell about that. After Doug became my roommate, we went out and actually bought a Volkswagen Bug to drive around, to go to East Berlin with and stuff. And so we had a little car. It wasn't, driving wasn't really big in Berlin, obviously, because you had the wall and everything. So you really couldn't go any place, except in the city. And I also want to show you some pictures of the Wannsee, which is kind of like, I guess you could think of it as Central Park for Berlin. And they had a wonderful zoo there, and so that there's some things I wanted to just point out to you with that. I have some great pictures of the Wannsee, and you can look that up on the internet too. It was a wonderful place. It was a great place to get out and walk and relax, get away from the city. And that was about as far as you could go because you'd hit the wall. So there's all that, and I also wanted to talk to you about things that would interconnect at the end. So I'll start to raise those, and as we go on and try to close the leaving Berlin and actually getting out of the Army and returning home. So I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.